Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. The loss prevention landscape is an ever-changing space. Veteran LP professional Rui Rodrigues speaks to the importance of staying ahead of the industry and the need to continually learn and grow as a professional. In this episode of The Voice of Retail, I sit down with Rui to do a top-to-bottom analysis of the state of loss prevention work. Together, we compare shifts in loss prevention both over time and between Canada and the US, and talk about his new role as Executive Advisor to Retail Council of Canada. Rui offers sobering insights on contemporary security, and we talk about the industry as it pertains to retailers in the pandemic.
You got to be able to muster through things. And, in crises, obviously people are going to turn to the LPAP, and there's going to be pressure. So you got to be able to face pressure well and have the ability to talk to folks about it and get it through. Sometimes LP professionals tend to want to be strong and closed off. You need to have that ability to vent and do that to stay sane. So thick skin,
Sure.
Dealing with stress. You can't be a 9-to-5er.
Let's listen in now. Rui, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm good. Well, it's great to hear your voice. You and I first met, I think, a couple of years ago. I was at RCC and getting involved with the LP Loss Prevention Committee. You were leading that at the time. Come a bit full circle in a bit of a way. We'll get to that later. But so we've known each other a couple of years, and I've benefited from your wisdom and advice. So thank you for joining me on the podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Michael, and reciprocal. You've always been a good person to talk to, so I appreciate this opportunity to speak to you again.
Yeah, well, listen, let's start. I know a bit about your background, but let's start at the beginning. Tell us about yourself, your personal, professional journey, what you do and what you've done and what you're doing today.
I've been in the loss prevention world for 25, 26 years, started with a company called Eaton's, which a lot of folks may not recall. Hopefully they do. Professionally, I've been a workaholic most of my life. Personally, I'm a father first and foremost, two beautiful girls that are 16 and 20. In my journey in life, they have been my biggest teachers as I've grown in my career and grown with them growing around me. They've taught me to be a learner. Don't mind sharing with everyone, or sharing that I've been a bit of a worrywart, and maybe that comes with being a parent. So my journey has always been on finding that balance. And I don't want to sound cliche between personal and professional, but I truly mean that. Yeah. Because I'm a workaholic and want to spend more time with my family, it's always finding the balance where you can find happiness doing those things together.
And it's a bit of an we're going to talk about this a bit more when I want to kind of tap into what and how and who make for great loss prevention professionals. But it's a bit of an occupational hazard, right? I mean, you're kind of always on in an LP role because trouble or challenges can happen, or opportunities, I guess, can happen anytime. And it's a very dynamic role. So I guess you're kind of hardwired a little bit to that too, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. And you said it, Michael. I mean, the industry and the businesses, you are always on call. It's crisis management, and nothing has taught us that more than the last couple of years. Yeah. So it is for folks that are, I don't want to say adrenaline junkies, but action junkies are like that. But because of the demand, you always have to be someone who can organize, balance, because there's also key things you need to move forward. So you can't always be in the weeds in the action. Right. And as you grow your career and take on more serious responsibilities, it's finding that balance. So it's a great role to learn how to be a great professional, learn organization and balance, and something that LP professionals today, I'm sure, are facing, and is part of the evolution and development of our industry and the leaders in it.
Tell me about some of the organizations you work for and the roles throughout your career. All retail, right? If I have that correctly, it's all been in one way, shape, or another in retail, maybe a bit on the vendor side. But talk about that a bit.
Yeah, primarily retail. So I started with Eaton's as an investigator, working on the floor. Worked up to a manager role there. Obviously, we know Eaton's closed up shop in 2000, 2001. Moved over to Hudson's Bay Company, similar model, big box. Store. Worked my way up there to a regional manager role. Had a great opportunity to go to a company called ICI Canada, which was Glidden paints and primarily paints, but they also had explosives. So I started to play a lot more in the health and safety risk management role at that time, as well as supply chain. Then went to Shoppers Drug Mart, very retail, but started learning more about the pharmaceutical and the semi-franchise environment, so a little bit different. So loved learning that. Then went to Future Shop Best Buy, focused more on a corporate role, looking after physical security, loss prevention, health and safety, supporting with insurance and other natures. So continuing my learning and then working with the field and stores. After Best Buy, went to Staples for my first director role. Really loved the role, the opportunities, the accountability, and doing things that were relevant to the organization, as well as starting to work more with the industry and organization and other leaders in retail. So we really loved the opportunity there. From Staples, worked on the vendor side for a little bit with a company called ASAP, helping them operationalize their business and focusing on developing and improving the guard service delivery for retail, because that was a primary focus. And then joined Holt Renfrew, which was my last role before joining RCC, and leading the program there. And it was loss prevention, risk management, safety, fraud, and again, doing what I've always continued to love doing, back to a similar environment that I was at HBC, but reshaping the program and transforming the program that was there with asset protection, but what they had as a focus, to making it more of a support, operationalized risk management and loss prevention program. And then most recently, of course, joined the RCC, which to me is a great opportunity, full circle, to continue to work with the LP risk management industry, with retail and peers, and help shape the future of loss prevention and risk management.
Well, and that's that full circle part. Now, the RCC role, not unlike mine, they're a client of yours, right? You're versus you've got your own consulting work that you're going to wrap around it, right? It's a good bit of both, right? Represent the industry and also be on your own for the harness all that and leverage all that wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, at the beginning of this year with COVID, it allowed me to pause and think about what's next for Rui. And I really saw a need for, mid and small size retailers who don't have departments or access to loss prevention professionals to open a consulting business and do more of that on my own, and build an offering there. And then with continued conversations with RCC, I had a great opportunity. I've known Diane Brizois for many, many years as a member, to join RCC as a consultant, to offer an advisory role and work with the industry around the big issues, and easing out of COVID restrictions, focusing on what's on people's minds, what are the common concerns, goals, interests that the RCC can support the industry. And one of the things I've noticed talking to my colleagues is there's a gap in leaders in Canada actually having the ability to get together to talk in the LP world, which you would think it happens, but we're all very busy. So I see this as a great opportunity to be able to bring that voice together, get them to talk through the issues and be that facilitator through the RCC to offer the support, to continue to bring us to the table, move issues along, and then collectively work with government, police, legislation to be a voice in those changes going forward. And I'm really excited about that opportunity because it's something certainly the industry needs, and certainly allows me to continue to do something I love doing.
All right, so you've been decades in loss prevention. Let's start talking about how it's changed perhaps over the course of your career and what stayed the same. So how have you seen the role, the profession evolve, maybe the challenges and the tools? What's been the evolution, and what are some of the things that have stayed the same? If you look back and go, that's exactly like it's always been.
Yeah, well, the industry has definitely evolved and continues to. I would say the things that have stayed the same, loss prevention, asset protection, resource protection, which is a whole other topic, Michael. Key things, investigations, both internal and external, are still part of the core. Shrink is part of any LP's department focus at some level. So inventory control and shrink, product loss. So those things I think are key. How we go about it, I think, continues to evolve. And today, I wouldn't say that there's a model that is consistent across Canada. And we're very different from the US. So, I speak in Canada terms. Our departments are typically smaller. Therefore, it's more what does the business need out of that department and what's more critical. I think what's also evolved is the way things have operated, what technology has done over the last decade, whether it's cameras, access control, and different technologies, and where LP can provide value-added services to the retail organization, leveraging the systems that they typically use for theft investigations like cameras, which today can do hotspots and loitering and other things that other areas of retail can benefit from. So there's been a convergence from technology and working with other departments, operationalizing more of LP. And then, of course, things have changed naturally with violence, organized crime, and organizations' response to it.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Has violence gone up, down, or is it a perception? Are we seeing it more? And if so, why do you think that is? Is that a response to something different? Why is violence increased in the stores?
It's a most probably prevalent topic on people's minds right now. And I will say it this way. Has it increased? Well, there's a perception that it is, and it is. However, we have to realize that for the last year and a bit, retail stores have been closed.
Yeah.
So when we think, we have to go beyond a little further back than that. But with the element of desperation, the fact that people wear masks, hats, sunglasses, and are more concealed, certainly there's more prevalence of it. And we see it in certain pockets of Canada. For example, the West Coast, Vancouver, property crime and violence. It's always been a bit prolific out there, but certainly on the increase, and we're seeing that. And as I talk to colleagues, obviously it's on everybody's mind around as we ease the restrictions and people are coming back in and we see the violence starting up again, and some of it are experienced more than they have previously. How do we prepare for that? How do we educate our frontline LP team if we have it? If it's just retail stores, what are our people going to do about it? What is the police going to do in response? What is the attorney generals and crown attorneys going to do if we bring matters like this forward? And partly because over COVID, we haven't been seeing the charges and prosecutions because courts were closed. We didn't want to have issues with jail cells and overpopulation. But it's certainly now a big topic as we ease out. What are we going to do about it? And let's collaborate to have a plan, both for retailers, police, and crowns, on when we see prolific violent offenders, that we need to see that there's serious support for charges, prosecution, so that we don't send the message to organized crime communities that it's okay to come into retail because there's no consequences. So is it increasing? Absolutely, as we ease out of restrictions and stores open. And it's on everybody's mind on how we best deal with this and collaborate with government police to send the message that it's not okay and protect our customers, our associates.
Follow-up question, if we think back to the before time, pre-COVID, because it's just been such an unusual time, what had over the past 20 years had violence increased before COVID hit? Was that a trend as well?
Yeah, and it's pocket related. So if you look at Stats Canada, overall, certain stats have gone down. Violence, and again, depending on how it's reported and categorized, certainly we have seen an increase of violence and violent offenders and weapons being used over the last few years. And we continue to see that increase. And again, more desperation and brazen tactics. So it is a good time as we come out of a crisis to continue to have that discussion so that we have an idea of how we're going to deal and know that there's support from government. Because, again, the concern is if we don't address it, it will continue to go up. And
it'll become a strategy, right? Basically, it'll become a strategy for organized crime as opposed to a tactic, in other words.
And we saw that, Michael, examples, the services that were essential that stayed open, like pharmacy and groceries, saw those incidents of increased violence with people leveraging face masks or spitting incidents, using that as a weapon. And we saw police respond to say if people are doing that, they do consider that a serious offense. So we definitely see that if we don't get a handle on it and make sure the support is there and there's collaboration, certainly it becomes a tactic. And naturally, the increase would continue if people know that the consequences are none or very low.
Picking up on something else you said, the differences between Canada and the U.S. I have listeners on both sides of the border, actually around the world. Now, we would know in Canada that our resources are structured differently. We have more, I've always described it, we have more breadth than depth, right? Because you just don't have the same number of people. So you have a lot of, you seem to have more specialization in the U.S. because you got more people and you've just got broader resources. Is that the extent of the difference? Or, I mean, there's probably a notional difference in your line of work. There's, a little less violence, gun violence, but I don't know. Is there a difference other than structurally, so to speak, on both sides of the border? Like if you were going to go, Staples, some of the organizations you work for, you've had counterparts in the States. What, if anything, is different in the U.S. in your line of work?
Yeah, so I think, based on the sheer size of some of the organizations in the U.S., the departments can be larger, depending on the organization, of course. So there's more opportunity at certain levels to work on other initiatives, meet with industry, collaborate. So I think that's for the difference between Canada and the U.S. is one key difference that, the leaders in Canada who have a lot of responsibility are typically inward facing a lot. So less time to meet with industry, to meet with colleagues, strategize. So I think that whole collaboration, the U.S. probably has the setup to be able to do that better. Crime, some of the major cities in the U.S., sheer population, they feel or deal with higher incident crime and violent crime than we do. However, we have certain cities where, like at Vancouver, for example, where those in Vancouver would tell you they're equal to, if not as bad as any of the U.S. cities. Right. So less of in Canada, but certainly some comparables. But I think just sheer nature of the number of big cities and population, certainly there's a bigger issue in the
scale.
U.S.
Sure. Bigger scale.
And then the departments, I think structure, if the department is larger, some departments in the U.S. may have more items under their portfolio, like safety, risk management, than some of the Canadian organizations. But we are seeing a trend where the LP asset protection departments in Canada are also now starting to, and some have for a number of years, taking on other responsibilities, whether it's health and safety, cybersecurity, risk management, business continuity, and so on.
So it's quite transferable between the two. And if we were talking about marketing departments, we'd have a similar conversation. So okay, that's interesting. Knowing what you now know, is there anything you would have done differently in your career? And I ask you that as we've had younger people perhaps earlier in their LP career starting out. Is there anything you would have done differently on the path that you took?
Tongue in cheek, I would say pick a different career. However, I say that really tongue in cheek because I do love this industry, and partly because I love to learn. I love problem solving. I love those aha moments. I love those moments when our industry does something that is value add or relevant that isn't expected coming out of our group, where you feel really good and you feel really good about what your team has accomplished. But that whole problem solving piece has always been of interest. So, I might have done some little things here and different, but I've come to where I am based on that. So I think more it's looking future, Michael, and continue to learn, continue to grow, adopt, and I'm not done learning yet. So I'm more focused on the journey forward and what I can do to help this industry and do something that is very relevant and work with a great group of leaders in Canada to shape that LP, AP world and be a value added to the organizations they're with.
We've touched on this a couple of times. What makes for a great LP professional? I mean, clearly you it's not a 9-to-5 job. So that's kind of the beginning point. But when you've hired lots of folks and you've probably given a ton of advice, what are the key characteristics, or if people are listening to this and say maybe that's a career for me, what are those key things? Imagine curiosity and a sense of discovery and trying to get to the bottom of things is a big characteristic. What are those top things?
Yeah, so you mentioned the word, and I'll come back to, but I mean, thick skin is critical. You got to be able to muster through things, and in crises, obviously people are going to turn to the LPAP, and there's going to be pressure. So you got to be able to face pressure well, and have the ability to talk to folks about it and get it through. Sometimes LP professionals tend to want to be strong and closed off. You need to have that ability to vent and do that to stay sane. So thick skin,
sure.
Dealing with stress. You can't be a 9-to-5er, and you kind of said it. You have to know that you're signing up for something that you're always going to be on call, because when stuff hits the fan, you're going to be the people. So you have to have that mindset of not looking for that 9-to-5. You have to be curious. you can't just sit and be okay with things. You got to poke at things. You got to be curious. You got to look for solutions. And you have to be very professional, right? You have to be able to not look for blame, not look for the aha, catch you. It's looking for that aptitude and attitude of where can I help? What is the issue? Understand that you're looking at things from a peripheral sense. Put yourself on the other side of things and understand why things might be happening. And they'd be collaborative in nature. So don't approach things like you would arresting a bad guy to say, caught you. If you're working with your business, it's working with, I see an opportunity. I can observe and make recommendations for changes, but work collaboratively. So bring that spirit of collaboration and problem solving and solution. But don't approach things with trying to find fault. Try to find, the good in things, and it makes for a happier work life anyway. So for LP professionals, all that, and then be a learner. The industry continues to evolve, whether it's cybersecurity, health and safety, technologies, you got to keep learning. You can't focus on just being good at the traditional, because, and a lot of colleagues I talk to are learning more about cybersecurity, taking courses.
Yeah,
so you have to continuously reinvest in yourself, because it continues to change and will continue to change, because threats come from different places all the time. And if you're not learning about what's going on out there, you're going to be behind.
Is it the kind of role where you're best to start in the stores? There's a lot of different starting points in a career in retail. Is it best? Is there a best practice? If you want to get into this career, you're best to start in the store at the investigation level, at the people level, and kind of work your way up, or is that can you start at the office level? Like, what would you advise?
Yeah, when I say if you want to lead something, you should have spent some time in it to understand it. So yes, I think you should start in the stores. Now, depending on where you are in your career and transition, if you can't start there, spend time there. So always invest in being closest to the issues, whether it's customer facing, store personnel, and we're speaking retail applies to supply chain. Make sure you spend a part of your time always on that shop floor, seeing what's going on, so that you can speak, from a position of knowing. But if you have the opportunity to start and work your way up through the roles and learn and build that credibility for having spent to the role, I think that provides great value. But if you don't have that opportunity, then make sure you're taking some of your time to spend there so that you can live it, see it, understand it, and be able to make better, more informed decisions when you are actually leading a program.
Let's talk about COVID, the COVID era in LP. We've touched on it a couple of times in the conversation already. There's obvious challenges around masks, and there's been all kinds of back and forth on masks. But I mean, it also has the element of people walking around in masks in the store. They're harder to identify. But beyond that, the obvious, talk about the key trends and things that have happened in the COVID era. And this isn't really a history lesson, because thankfully we're kind of moving to the next phase of the COVID era. But what are the key trends, basically, you're hearing from everyone you're speaking to, members of Retail Council of Canada and other LP professionals? What are those things that are first and foremost on their minds around the profession?
Yeah, so I think the biggest shift from COVID has been the public safety and employee safety. And safety and security have always kind of gone hand in hand, more so now. Obviously, in a crisis, there's the theft, there's the crime, there's those issues. And then, of course, and most importantly, there's the safety of the employee and, of course, the customers coming in. So the heightened awareness around safety is key out of COVID. I think through COVID, it taught us that when we rally together crisis, we can come together, we can make things happen. There's a lot of collaboration, so it showed us that we can collaborate, and crisis naturally does that to people. But I think it also sent the message that we need to continue to do that going forward, which I'm really looking forward to doing from my role here at RCC. I think out of COVID, it also taught us how people band together. Yes, there's the crime, there's the elements, there's the chronic issues, but it also showed a great collaboration of retailers working together, chatting together, saw some great humane examples of people helping each other out. So I think that resonated that, yes, you can focus on all the negative on the crisis, but there's a lot of goods that came out of it as well. So I think that sticks with people, and there's the sense of need of let's keep that going. Let's keep that connectivity and working together, and a greater sense of community, I think, evolved from that as well. And I think
it feels, I've talked to executives, and it feels that's going to be a bit of a challenge. Spoken differently, it was one of those rare times, probably in our lives, let's hope, that there was this one galvanizing mission, right? Everyone was going in the same direction, whether they wanted to or not in some ways. We got to get around this COVID crisis. And when the crisis abates, thankfully, so does the mission, that aligning mission, right? I guess that's a big part of your role at RCC is, okay, let's keep, as you said, let's keep that together. Let's keep that momentum together of collaboration, even though we don't have this big bad thing hanging above our head and it's kind of back to business as usual, right? I mean, that's I think the trick for all of us. Is that what you're thinking as well?
Yeah. And I would say, beyond that, Michael, resonating, and this is very relevant for the LP asset protection world is, through this, I think any organization that has a loss prevention asset protection department saw the value from that department, right? These are the folks that have been there through and through, whether it's the front lines in your corporate supporting, amongst others, whether it's marketing, public relations, operations. But I think the one message I would take out of this, and even for the C-suite and organizations is, and I think they do, is appreciate the department you have, that when all things are down and when there's issues, you call upon and they're always there.
Yeah.
And from that, take out, how do you continue that? From a value add, recognize what was brought forward. I don't see a lot of LP folks reporting to presidents or things of that nature. And it is what it is. In multiple organizations, it's different levels. But if I think about trusted advisor in an organization, and LP being that, unbiased department that is there to support, and if doing the job really well, is that trusted advisor. Yeah. I think there's something to take out of this around these folks are always there and you can count on them how are we leveraging and how are C-suite leveraging that department for future and making sure they're a voice, at that C-suite as advisory, part of the planning, part of the looking forward if they're not already there? And is there a way to incorporate that? Because obviously, speaking for the industry that I love, this isn't about just having a place there to have a place. This is about providing another opinion from a trusted advisor capacity that allows decisions to be shaped with that information. And I think at times that's missing. So I think, if there's one thing I would take out of this message for that suite is there's tremendous value there. And they're the folks you count upon when chips are down. And maybe there's more that you can pull them into at a strategic and forward-looking level, if not already there, to be in that role of being more of that advisory capacity and being, more of your, network at that level.
It's interesting because what my perception is what the profession is really good at, which is, you're hardwired to respond and be helpful and solve issues, is also kind of the risk is in some executives, it kind of puts you in that box. If there's trouble, I'll call them and they'll take care of it because they're great at, taking care of issues. But I think what your point is really good is how do you kind of transform that or move that along to where let's get them as a profession, LP professionals, AP, at the table first as we're designing programs, as we're creating stories, as we're doing layouts, as we're doing all these things, right? That's where I see the retailers moving forward fastest is where they get beyond, when there's trouble, call and get to the, how do we structure this to avoid trouble, but B, just get that, you guys are on the floor, see it, you're in the computer rooms, you're at all these different levels, right? I guess that's the not just the aspiration, but that's kind of, a nice point of arrival for any organization, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the key, Michael, it's full circle, right? And that's why, whether it's loss prevention, asset protection, and risk management, you see things, you audit for things, you can bring those forward, you can help part of shaping it at the top from a risk management perspective, looking forward at what are the risks coming to the organization and threats. Yeah. and be part of that conversation, and then make sure you're communicating that back down through your teams or through the stores from a protection, awareness, and so forth. But not only can you gather the information and bring it up and represent it, but you can help shape it and look forward. So there is the value for both, right? There's the the tactical, on the ground, feet on the ground, gathering, observing, dealing with. And then there's that senior level of, based on that, it's summarizing, providing the insights, highlight, and helping shape the forward-looking strategy, but also looking out of the organization at what risks are coming and starting those conversations at the top, helping formulate those programs and then disseminating them to the organization. So, part of the point is more about the placement of that leader in LP, and are they involved in the right positions where they can be the best at providing forward-looking threat risk assessment and helping shape as one of the voices to shape what gets communicated, as well as gathering it and bringing it forward to that level to make sure, again, it's part of the conversations and the programs that are being deployed.
So top 3 issues, last question, top 3 issues in your mind or in the LP professionals that you're talking to, top 3, is it cyber crime, organized crime / violence in the store, and is there a third? What are the top 3 issues that are on the top ledger of when LP professionals are talking to the people they work with, their counterparts at the C-level? What are those top 3 things that they spend most of their time on or are most focused on?
Yeah, so I'd say organized crime is certainly up there, and it can be in different value, whether it's professional or organized crime groups, chronic thieves, and that. So crime in nature is certainly one of the top topics for sure. I think just with the emerging, whether it's, and I'll lump it into one, cybersecurity fraud, e-com fraud, that is definitely a big topic. It's been emerging for a while, but it's continuous. And focus.
I guess with the rise of, it's a good point, right? We've had this great acceleration of e-commerce. That brings with it, not necessarily new challenges, but certainly more of them, would you say?
Yeah, and companies that weren't in e-com before that are jumping into that need to have the programs, need to have fraud mitigation, and, the controls in place in that. So there's definitely a tremendous role for LP risk management play in there to shape that out for organizations and protect it going forward. So I would say that's a big topic. I think the other one is this collaboration, and it could be top 10, Michael, is working together with police, with Crown to deal with these other issues that are rising, whether it's organized crime, violence. So I would say a big focus for LP is identifying those key nuggets that are externally facing them and which groups we need to work with, and moving forward around some key decisions to protect their retail organization. So I would say it's more the collaboration amongst retailers, LP, police, Crown, talking about these big topics to shape what we do about it in the future.
Well, listen, we've covered this great conversation. We've covered a wide gamut. Where can people go to learn more about you, get in touch, find out maybe perhaps what you're doing on the consulting side? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, the business I formed, the name is RUCA Consulting. Most folks reach me because they know me or that and word of mouth. I haven't really created a website. Maybe that's something I need to do. They certainly
LinkedIn,
can reach
though,
me.
Right?
They certainly can reach me at RCC, going onto the RCC site and finding me if it's about work, to help them from a retail perspective in RCC. And then, of course, through LinkedIn, and colleagues in the industry, anybody who's looking for my support in a loss prevention risk management support outside of RCC can reach out to me there, whether, again, LinkedIn or just through colleagues, and hopefully in the future a website.
All these things will come, but the LinkedIn is a great place to start, and again, the RCC. Well, Rui, thanks so much for joining me. It was great to hear your voice, great to catch up. Always such an interesting conversation, and I thank you for taking the time to join me on The Voice of Retail, and I look forward to keeping in touch and wish you much continued success.
Thanks, Michael. It's been great catching up with you. Same to you. Enjoy the rest of this summer, and we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of The Voice of Retail. Be sure and follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts so you don't miss out on the latest episodes, industry news, and insights. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a rating review, as it really helps us grow so that we continue to get amazing guests onto the show. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc, president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., And if you're looking for more content or want to chat, follow me on LinkedIn or visit my website at meleblanc.co. Until next time, stay safe, have a great week.